Hello everyone, I'm Justice Graves, and I could talk about my campaign, but today we're going to talk about something much more important. We are going to be talking about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 that was signed under President Lyndon B. Johnson. Now, the reason why we are doing this is because of the situation at the Department of Ed with its American History and Civics Education new regulation that is currently in the proposed notice and comment phase. If you don't know what any of that means, I highly suggest you watch two other videos on this subject, the federal rulemaking process, and then the first video on emergency at the Department of Education, critical race theory to be funded. I really encourage that you listen to those because those have a lot of important information. Today's video will also be in response to that. We are going to be looking at the laws that authorize the Department of Education to put or propose this kind of regulation in the Federal Register. Now, I'm going to be very clear here. This video is going to talk about more of the language of the bill, what is in the bill. These particular statutes have not necessarily been challenged under law, so there is no legislative history on any of these. There will be no legislative history in the next video either, which is about evidence-based interactions. That's extremely important, and if you're more interested in what's going on and what can be done potentially to argue against critical race theory through this new regulation, I would skip over and go to that video right now. Right now, don't watch this one unless you're interested in where the money is going, where different, what are the authorizing statutes. If you're interested in that, stay here. If you're not, go immediately. If you're about to write to the Department of Education, go immediately to that video. Now, here's the deal. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to switch over. This is going to be in a presentation, and it's titled Parts of the ESEA, or the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, Title 20 U.S.C. Sections 6661 to 6663 as amended, and we will also talk about other related statutes that are extremely important. U.S.C., I know I've used it before to mean the United States Constitution. As I use it through this video, I want you to understand that it is commonly known as the United States Codes. Those are the laws of the land, the statutes of the land that get put in based on laws. When laws get passed, they get put into the United States Codes. They don't just float out into space as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. They exist in a book filled with all of the other laws that have been passed by Congress over the years, and the new regulations that have been passed in departments. So I want you to understand that. So we're going to move forward. Here we go. So why, the what and the why. Why are we talking about this? What are these codes? 20 U.S. codes, sections 661 to 6663, are the authorizations that give the Secretary of Education the ability to fund American history and civics education programs. 20 U.S. Code, section 6621, part 3, sets what percent amounts are appropriated under Title 20 U.S. Code Section 66603, Part B, that can be used for these programs in history and civics education. This is where the money comes from. This is where it's going. That's the only reason we're talking about these. Specifically, Title 20 U.S.C. Section 6662 and Title 20 U.S.C. Section 6663 are part of the authorizing statutes for the Department of Education's new proposed regulation, American History and Civics Education, that will be funded by H.R. 1814. That's currently what it is in the House of Representatives, called Civics Secures Democracy Act. This is the money that's going to go into here. This is the money that already goes into here. Be aware of that. What we are going to cover, Section 6661, which is that the program is authorized, 6621, which are the reservations or the money amounts, 66603, the authorization of certain appropriations. We're going to talk about U.S. Code, Section 6662, Presidential and Congressional Academies for American History and Civics, and U.S. Code, Section 663, the National Activities. So, what is 6661? It is the History and Civics Program Authorization. It authorizes that what monies are to fund these programs are those that are reserved under Title 20 U.S. Code 6621, Part 3. Its purpose, this code, these series of codes, 6661 to 6663, are to improve the quality of American history, civics, and government education, to improve the quality of teaching for elementary and secondary education schools, not less than 26% of the amount of funding reserved shall be for activities in 6662, and not less than 74% of the amount of funding shall be reserved for activities under 6663. Those activities, the presidential and congressional academies, and the national activities, will be defined later in this presentation. We are going to talk about 66621 right now because the program authorization is very short, just tells you what the percentages amounts are. Now, we are not going to go into what these other programs are because these are other statutes, but only 1.4% of the monies allocated through this statute go to American history and civics education currently in the ending of this next fiscal year. Only 1.4%. 66603 is what those amounts are. There's a huge amount of about $2 billion, $2.2 billion that goes for supporting effective instruction, which goes for, you can check this out on your own, these sections. But for the national activities, i.e. history and civics education, these big amounts, the $468 million, the $469 million, and the $489 million for these different fiscal years are what go towards history and civics education. And so what does that all look like? What do these numbers look like? And how are they allocated when we look at that only 1.4% go to American history and civics education from the national activities? And then that gets divided further by 26 and 74%. What does that look like? Where does the money go? How does it get allocated? Well, for these two statutes, which are where things actually get done, approximately 0.364% of all that money that you saw over here goes for it in any given fiscal year. With 6663, that's 1.036%, which is 74% of 6661. These are the awarded amounts. These are how they are divvied up. I'm going to leave this here for a second so that you can see it. You can take a screenshot if you want to. If you understand that, that's great. If you don't, that's fine. But at least some of you know where the money is going or what those amounts look like. At least for up to fiscal year 2020. I do not know what fiscal year 2021 looks like yet, what they have allocated. Now these next 4 slides are the most important ones because these ones are what are authorizing the Department of Education to propose CRT grant programs, essentially. So let's talk about it. What is Code 6662? It's a presidential and congressional academies for American history and civics. From the amounts that are granted, 12 grants are created from that money. So 12 grants are made from all the, each year 12 grants are allocated from all the money in here. They are awarded based on if they can establish a presidential academy for teaching American history and civics. So presidential academies are programs that teach teachers how to teach history and civics, or seminars. And congressional academies for students of American history and civics teach students. Do you get the picture? Institutions of higher education, nonprofits, museums, libraries, or research centers, or a consortium of such entities are eligible to apply for the grants. Grants can last no longer than 5 years under this section. And when a grant is proposed, that grant money must be used to create a presidential academy or a congressional academy. We'll define what those are in just a second. And the school also has to do what's called match funding or matching fund. What that means is that if you get, for example, a grant of $1 million, let's pretend I'm an institution, I get a grant of $1 million. I have to put up another $1 million of non-government funds to that. So then the program gets $2 million. I'm the one that hosts the program. I'm the one that got the grant for it. I'm the one that had to put other money into it. So then it's $2 million that goes forward. Do you get the picture? Presidential academies take place typically during the summer or otherwise. They're typically programs or seminars hosted by different institutions, sometimes different colleges, sometimes they are nonprofit organizations that are no less than 2 weeks and not more than 6 weeks. Sometimes they take place in the summer, sometimes they take place during certain academic sessions or different semesters. 50 to 300 teachers are selected to attend who are history and civics educators from public or private elementary and secondary education schools. So, different middle and high schools. The attending teachers get stipends to attend based on the program length so that they don't incur personal costs. So the program's free for people to go to. Congressional academies are basically the exact same thing, but 100 to 300 students are selected based on recommendations from their school principal or school leader, and they are also typically juniors or seniors. Look this up, the Center for Civic Education. They do programs that are based on the congressional academies. So just be aware of that. All right, now we are going to jump into 20 U.S. Code Section 6663, History and Civics National Activities. These activities are to promote new and existing evidence-based, and I forgot to put the citation there for what code, U.S. Code, these evidence-based programs are part of, but that's a surprise. You got to go to the next video to find that out. Strategies and programs to innovate American history, civics, and geography education, etc. All of those things under those fields. And the key point here is evidence-based, but that's not only the key point. These programs should especially benefit low-income students and underserved populations. So they are using a statute to say, hey, this is the authorizing statute to serve CRT. We're going to teach critical race theory to students, especially to low-income students and underserved populations based on evidence-based strategies and programs. I wonder what we can what we can use to our advantage in seeing this part of the statute. Reserve funds can only be used to allocate grants for such programs. These new evidence-based approaches shall show potential to improve the quality of education, demonstrate innovation, scalability, accountability, and a focus on underserved populations. They must, they have to, they shall. And then they may include hands-on engagement activities. So maybe you'll do something hands-on, or you can just be lectured at for 3 hours. And they may include programs to educate about history and the principles of the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights. They may include it. They may not. They don't have to teach that when they have these programs. Grants will last no longer for a period of 3 years. That's different than the other statute, 6662. The Secretary may renew a grant one time in the near future for an additional 2-year period. So it's a total of potentially 5 years that this grant is awarded for. Grants awarded should be to different eligible entities in geographically diverse areas. That means urban, suburban, and rural, a good mix of them. And an eligible entity is an institution of higher education, typically like a college or university or a different nonprofit or for-profit organization. So I'm going to go back 1 second. Again, look at this. They are saying that you have to use new and existing evidence-based strategies that benefit specifically low-income students. This is a really important part that we're going to talk about. This entire section right here, and I can pull it up so that way I can actually show you the citation, because we have a few minutes left on this video that we could do. I can pull that in. Where is the citation? 6663. Evidence-based strategies. Here it goes. What is the citation? 20 U.S.C. Section 708, Part 21-A. So, or Part 21, Part A. Subpart A. So, evidence-based. We're going to talk about this, but this is the citation if you are willing to go forward with it. If you wanted to look it up ahead of time. I'm going to put this on the screen. Just leave it there for a second. And then I'm going to take it off the screen because it's not that important right now. Again, promote new and existing evidence-based strategies. What does that mean? Is that something that we can use when we comment to the Department of Education? Is that something we can use to criticize the Department of Education on what it is doing? Is critical race theory an evidence-based strategy or an evidence-based intervention that actually works? I think we all know the answer is no. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. This is a quick overview of, I'm going to switch out before I finish that sentence. This is a quick overview of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act as amended of 1965. And we're specifically talking about parts 20 U.S.C. sections 6661 to 6663. I hope this was definitely informational. I hope this was an easy breezy cover through. I know there was probably a lot of things that you're like, well, what does that mean? Or how is this, work in terms of what they're doing with the Department of Education with its new regulation? Well, I'm here to tell you that basically, in a nutshell, what they are doing is they are going to give grants out to, if they change the priorities of this grant money, this money is going to go to different institutions, and it's going to prioritize them to teach CRT or to do CRT-based research now that is evidence-based, and they're going to target low-income students and underserved populations specifically. So if that doesn't freak you out, if there's nothing that you take away from this, it's that. It's specifically meant to do that. Nothing else. And we all know critical race theory is bad as it is. So that was a quick overview. I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to write anything in the comments. If you are confused about anything that I said in this video, I hope that this presentation, even if you slow down and read it piece by piece by piece, makes perfect sense. That's all I got for this video. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. I really appreciate it.